This is Mike McDonald, WebPro News, and we are in Seattle for SMX Advanced. I'm with Rachel Pasqua from iCrossing. And Rachel, you were on a panel here in the last couple hours about social and mobile and things like that, and they were talking about tools. But then we had a conversation just a second ago off camera about some of the problems with social and mobile and how some of these big social sites aren't really dealing with mobile as well as they could. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So I talked more about tips than tools, because really most of the tools that we're all out there using, for social, for monitoring, for example, things like that aren't available on mobile devices or aren't available specifically for mobile devices, which really surprised me. I'm surprised that there's no Radeon 6 for iPad. Considering how much marketing people, and especially social marketing people, are running around, we're all glued to our mobile devices. So I'm surprised that there's that disconnect there, but I think it makes sense when you look at how confusing and frightening mobile is.
Right.
For
It's changing so fast, and everybody's it's hard. It's like hitting a moving target a little bit.
Yeah. Well, no. I think you've got to start somewhere. Like my best recommendation is, start with your site. The vast majority of users out there are accessing social networks, Facebook, MySpace, especially MySpace because of the teen contingent, and Twitter via mobile. Twitter was originally conceived largely to be mobile in practice. Facebook has 100 million mobile users. So point being, if you've got a presence in these spaces, if you've got a Facebook brand page, if you've got a Twitter account, a lot of traffic is probably coming to your site from mobile devices. And if your site's difficult to use, literally, if your site takes more than 15 seconds to load, users are just going to be bouncing off.
Right.
Or, God forbid, if you have a lot of flash, they're not going to be able to view it at all. So if you're heavily investing in social spaces, you've got to be cognizant of that there's like a high mobile contingent there. And you've got to cater to their needs. Make your content usable and make it findable.
Well, we talked a little bit about some of the Facebooks and the Twitter guys, and some of these guys, in terms of apps and mobile, tend to lag behind some of the third-party developers for their apps or for their services.
Yeah. Well, Facebook in particular, and I'm not quite sure why that is. That's something that only they really understand.
Twitter. Twitter's not my Android Twitter is not. It's kind of new, right? It just came out recently.
Yeah, I haven't downloaded the Android one. I just downloaded the iPad one, and it's kind of behind.
Do you think we're going to see like a point here in the next 6 months where everybody just clicks and says, okay, here's the real deal Facebook app for Android from Facebook?
Maybe. From looking at what slightly more mobile savvy social networks are doing, like Foursquare and Looped. Those guys are really doing their homework, and they're building really comprehensive suites of tools that enable people to manage their presence in those networks, and that will enable them to monetize that. So maybe that's the game. Maybe Twitter and Facebook are taking that step back.
Do you think that the emergence of Android will help speed this along? Since there are now two platforms, really big ones that a lot of people are using. Facebook was initially not going to have an Android app at all.
Yeah.
Right? They said that initially, and they have one now, but.
Yeah, well, that's the conversation that we were having that actually got interesting about Android, is that Android, it's a lot more egalitarian as a platform. The devices are cheaper. They're just as fast. They're arguably, in a lot of cases, just as good. They're going to be in more hands. There was more carriers. So, yeah, it's going to speed that transition from like a semi-feature phone society to a smartphone society. I think it's reasonable to say within the next year or so, you're going to get like an Android device for nothing with your plan.
Right.
That will be comparable to, the Google Nexus One that I have here. But where it goes from there, it's hard to say. They've got a long way to go with their app store, but then there's an argument there, app versus web,
right,
and how that will pan out. To me, I think that the app stores aren't going to go away because they're a monetization channel.
Well, exactly.
So if you have content to monetize, you have a vested interest in keeping it in the app store, for publishers, for entertainment brands, things like that. But
well, do you think more small businesses and website owners will look to, fix our site for mobile, one, obviously, or do we just need to make an app? There are a lot of people that are talking about building apps and things like that.
But apps are the new web. Apps are the new flavor of the month, and people, I don't want to say I talk people out of apps, but I try to help them reprioritize, because most of the time, I spend a lot of time talking about iPhone apps, and especially now iPad apps with clients. And a lot of them are coming to me because their competitor put out an iPad app, or their CMO just got an iPad and he wants an iPad app, which is not, it's not the right reason to invest in anything.
And they're scratching their head like, what are we going to make on an app?
Reprioritize. I can tell you what the trend that I see and the tack that we're taking with our clients at iCrossing, because we do search, we do social, but we do a great deal of web development and web creative. And the direction that we see everything going in is creating better content management systems, because that's what it's really all about, creating content management systems that can render for maximum portability, not just to social networks, but to alternate web platforms.
Right.
You know, and most sites now, most brands are working with outdated CMSs that don't lend themselves to that kind of portability. You know, whether it's porting your content to Facebook or to the iPhone.
Well, we're seeing some more stuff. We just found some stuff last week for WordPress, a plug-in. Throw it on there. It
Alex
detects,
King's
it
WordPress
detects
plugin,
and
it works
how
great.
you're in a mobile version, serve your ad, the whole shebang. So,
Well, that's a good example of rendering to different platforms. I mean, what is WordPress but a big CMS for everyone? So that's where we see it going, you know, and I think that's part of why there's this lag, because so many brands understand that mobile is something that they need to invest in. They need to think about emerging platforms, but they're dealing with hopelessly antiquated sites and systems, and changing, you know, scrapping all of that and starting from scratch that's a huge undertaking. Yeah.
Rachel, thank you very much for taking time to talk to us today.
Thank
Very
you.
informative. This is Mike McDonald, Web Pro News, and we are in Seattle for SMX Advanced.